The lovely thing about both NFV and about MEC is it's the IT-ization of telecoms.
5G represents a revolution in how networks have been built in the past, and more importantly, for the kinds of services that will be enabled on top of them.
The goal to offer various networks in one, to offer network slicing. Here, edge computing plays a key role. Also for offering low latency services, you definitely need to have edge computing.
5G is focused on how devices interoperate or interact with the edge of the network.
If you move the cloud service to a cloudlet close to the edge, now 5G becomes valuable.
It's really a transformation of the entire network, allowing for things like network slicing, which were never possible in the previous network. And to do that kind of thing, virtualization and the ability to use NFV and SDN is sort of critical.
NFV and MEC is NFV to a very significant extent is an internal transformation of a telco industry that has to happen.
5G needs mobile edge computing to succeed.
There are things that you can now do with a mobile edge computing infrastructure that displaces kind of the old world.
We really need to think of a completely different way of building apps, building solutions, and I think the edge compute capability allows us to do that.
Being capable of composing resources on demand relative to the services that are being enabled and implemented is a key component of enabling 5G at scale.
Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to tonight's TelecomTV super panel, being held here in probably the snazziest car lot in the world. This is our second time here at the Lohmann Museum and they've got more than 250 vintage and rare cars here, and you'll all get a chance to look at them a bit later on after tonight's panel session. But business of the day now is to just say that this is, as I said, sponsored by Hewlett Packard Enterprise and Intel, and the subject for tonight is, are MEC and NFV the key building blocks for 5G? And to answer that question, I have 5 panelists here, all of whom are good friends with each other and with TelecomTV, so we know each other well. And I'm going to introduce them very quickly. They'll tell you more about themselves, I'm sure, in the course of what we're going to be talking about. On my left is Caroline Chan from Intel. Caroline, welcome. Last saw you in Barcelona.
That's right.
At Mobile World. Next door, Diego Lopez, Telefonica. Diego, good to see you again. Diego's suffering a bit. He's got a bad cold, so he'll be croaking at us.
I will try to make my voice as clear as possible.
Thank you. Next to him is Marcus Brunner of Swisscom. Marcus, good to see you again.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. Then Axel Clauberg from Deutsche Telekom. Axel, also welcome to you. And down at the end there, Vinay Saxena. I'm going to give you his title. He's a fellow of Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Not just a common or garden MP, he's a fellow. One of only 12, so welcome as well.
Thanks.
So let's get to this. I'm going to ask first, I'm going to ask Axel this question to begin with. And I'd like to say this. It is pretty much a chicken and an egg situation, many people say. You know, it's this old question, did Adam have a navel, sort of thing. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Which comes first, NFV or MSC? Well, beg your pardon, MEC.
Well, the answer sounds so easy, on the first look at least. NFV just got 5, and edge computing is not even there yet in production. But on the second side, looking a little bit deeper, it's actually not that easy to answer, because it very much depends on where you define the edge, and it very much depends on the operator and how far they are in the NFV deployment cycle, for example. If you, let's say, look at a country like Germany, you can deliver low latency services with less than 10 milliseconds, actually still from locations I would call core locations. And those are the locations we're starting with NFV as well. So in this case, NFV would be first. But if you look at other operators, like in China and other places, they are starting with edge services first. So for them, the picture looks different. So there's no one-size-fits-all in the answer, like with the chicken and the egg.
Okay. Are you all in agreement with that? Or is there something different going on?
Well, I tend to think that this, as it happens, because these kind of questions happened in the past about whether NFV was possible without SDN or not. I would say that for sure you can have any of them independently. You can have MEC independently of NFV and NFV independently of SDN and MEC independent of SDN. The point is that the fact is that it would be extremely difficult to avoid the succession. It's the same way that it's extremely difficult to have, I don't know, mass production without electricity, or I don't know, central heating without oil, or power plants. You can, for sure you can. But it would be so difficult that there is no reason for trying to go that way.
Yeah, I agree with Diego. I think if there is a market need, people will deliver. However, without NFV, MEC will be more difficult, probably not as cost effective, but you know, people still do it on-prem because they need have their requirements. But NFV will make MEC so much easier. It's like a perfect marriage.
There is one, is there?
There is one.
Okay, thank you for that. We've skirted around the edge of this. My next question to you as a panel is, listening to what you were saying, does MEC even need NFV? Diego addressed part of that. What do you say? Vinny, you go for this one.
So I think, you know, if you look at the principles of NFV, I think they'll be leveraged in the MEC deployment. So I don't think, you know, we can say that, you know, MEC can be done. MEC can be done without NFV. There's no doubt about it. But should I take advantage of the principles of NFV and SDN to deploy MEC? The answer is absolutely. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind is as we deploy MEC, are we taking advantage of the principles of NFV and SDN or the programmability of the network to deliver the services from the edge that truly deserves to be running there? In other words, what services run on the edge? Where is the edge, as Alex said, you know, becomes critical. So defining that, defining the business case, the services that go along with it, and then picking the right principles architecturally that make sense to deploy these services. So I think NFV will play an integral part, in my opinion, to deliver MEC services.
Marcus.
So for us as Swisscom, it's sort of the same thing, whether it's MEC or NFV. We don't see really big difference. And even if, I mean, Axel says he has a small network, we have like a city network of his. So I mean, Swisscom as a small country, we have only a few milliseconds cross country, so there is no point in edge. Probably our whole network is edge already.
That's a different approach, I'll give you that.
But we recently actually did a trial in China. Actually, there's a white paper and press release around it. And you'll be surprised if you think about in China, it is a large country, but people think the fiber everywhere. But we work with Tencent and China Unicom and Nokia in that trial. Well, we're surprised to learn that without MEC, the latency is around 30 milliseconds. So that was very significant for you to do like a video content, and they were trying to augmenting live action on top of a live action and rebroadcast it through microchannel, and it really was achievable with MEC, and that really proven out the business model. And then the next discussion is, how does the money transaction changing hands between the network operator like you and a content owner like the over-the-top guys, and where does the entire value chain make sense for this to go a large scale? That is really the crux of the equation right now.
Yeah. I think there are some commonalities as well. When we look at NFV, there's a journey we're on towards cloud-native applications, and I strongly believe that cloud-native is a prerequisite for edge computing as well. And that brings up the common problem for both. It's actually the orchestration problem. And we're also going to see mixed deployments where you have for example, partner applications which are produced in the edge, but there might be core services which are run in the edge as well, like in the mobile network, to guarantee the low latency, you need to have some core functionalities in the edge as well. So you're going to see that mix, and that's why the two are dependent on each other. And as both are moving towards cloud native, I think that's the way forward anyhow.
So probably I was a bit too negative on the edge because, I mean, we have use cases where we run basically an edge component on customer side. There are use cases for that as well. It's not because of the latency in our network or something like that, but there are business data control, security-oriented features, but not the latency bit.
No, but anyway, I'm glad that Axel came with the matter of orchestration, because it's something that I think is crucial in the whole relationship. Because right now, NFV is very much based on cloud. And cloud is very much associated with big, huge, consolidated data centers that are providing service to hundreds of thousands or millions of people and different services and all the like. If we're talking edge, we're talking small, very distributed, sparse computing facilities in which the current orchestration models probably would simply not work. The time, just if you think about the current procedures for cloud federation to integrate different orchestrators, they are in the minutes delays. If we're talking about an orchestration or almost to real-time applications, we cannot afford that, simply. And well, when it comes to the coordination of this running on the big data center, etc., the challenge is there, and a completely new approach to orchestration. And what is most important is a reduced footprint of the orchestrator. Right now, running the leanest OpenStack costs 2-3 servers, top range servers. You cannot afford that if you're going to make a distributed infrastructure in which you will have 2 servers running applications, 4 servers running orchestration. Tell me.
Well, I don't know. That's the questions you're here to answer.
No, I mean, we have been working on this. We have several projects. I mean, part of that, the project that we are running with the collaboration of ETSI and many other operators, OSM precisely is very much focused on having a much more lightweight orchestration mechanisms able to run at the edge. And we are working with that in several research projects as well.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on slightly. We talk about use cases. Use cases have been mentioned. Caroline, you mentioned. I'm going to come back to you again about this. Do the new use cases at MEC will purportedly help to justify the CSP's return on investment in NFV?
I'd like to think so. Obviously, there's enough operator here to answer. But so, if I may dare to share some of that, we've been working on this for a couple of years, and working with different partners, and some of them, the operators are actually in the room. I work with heavily with the HPE, for example. Some of the learning we have found is that because we are at a stage we're trying to find the right business model and the ROI, we will actually go to the enterprise first and understand their pain points and requirements. One of the first things we did was actually a retail store. You wouldn't think about it, a retail store, they're self-contained. But in reality, the retail store, both in terms of operation and user experience, is really, really important. You will be surprised to know that the desire to have AR, VR. In the case that we actually go into deployment later this year, and they were able to share that had they not have the MEC, in order to deploy new application like AR, VR in their store, would have taken them a year and a half, versus now, when the trial that we put up was like in November. By the time I went to visit the store in February, it's already there. So in a very short time, to be able to add on new applications per store, it's a very within a localized content. Not to say that orchestration need to be there. Right now, it's still done manually, but when they go they launch commercially, they have to be able to manage it. So that is obviously an issue that we all need to solve. And then we also the other vertical we looked at is the transportation, some of the smart transportation, smart city being a setup right now. It's hotbed right now in U.S. There's quite a few smart city projects working on. Connected car, we have announced 5G AA. We also announced AECC with Toyota and Docomo and Denso and Ericsson. It's all in a sense to explore that, what can this do? We have another initiative in Santa Clara called 5G Innovation Initiative. Is focusing on verticals. So in that case, the founding members, besides Intel and Ericsson, is actually GE and Honeywell. So extremely vertical focus and really go all the way out and try and learn fast and fail fast. So you know what not to do.
Having done this with verticals, 2 or 3 verticals, what did you learn very quickly?
Now, the first thing because I came from a wireless background, I think most people here are. When you go in and talk to the people there, you're actually talking with the IT guys. You have to completely take on a different persona. I used to still talk about DBs, and they don't want to hear about that. They really want to hear about security. There better be a Chinese wall between my data and the operator data. It's so important to them. You go into a connected car, people start talking about blockchain. And that is, I just said it. The joke is, if I said the word, anybody say blockchain, you guys take a drink. Let's see who falls down the chair first. It's all me. I'm buying. So it's security, like Diego, you mentioned. It's really important. Manageability, accountability. They know so much of billing because they will make out the arrangement, but they need to know exactly how my user experience are as enterprise, because most of the time it's B2B to C. So that all wrap into the learning. So we start approaching the problem not from a communication perspective, but much from a comms and a compute perspective, or more of a cloud with a connectivity perspective.
Okay, Caroline. Other use cases? Anything you're going to tell us?
Yeah, probably on the use case side, I mean, one comment I have to make here is, I mean, there are a lot of these use cases around. We have a hard time to see that you really need MEC to implement them. And we have a hard time to see that somebody is willing to pay extra for it, and with all the complication of distribution and so on. What we really need is what you sort of mentioned a little bit, that third parties install things on that. We need security, we need PaaS, cloud native type of capabilities in our NFV platforms. That's given for us. That's sort of in a B2B type of case, you need this type of capability. But it's sort of for me a bit independent whether this is MEC type or not.
Axel?
We definitely need partners to make that happen. A lot of the vertical applications will be dependent on partner. And we as operators indeed have the task on the security side. When you look at healthcare vertical, when you look also even at automotive, I wouldn't like my insurance to get data from my way of driving sometimes. These data need to be protected, and that's one of the key tasks of the operator, to actually guarantee that under all circumstances. And it fits quite nicely with actually us extending our critical infrastructure towards the edge as well. So I think there's a key role for the operator, but there's also a key role for partners.
I think the other industry that we haven't talked about is the hospitality, the hotels. We haven't talked about the events, so stadiums, where we run, games and so forth. So there are a host of use cases that we potentially see. Healthcare is extremely important. I think the part that I think we also need to figure out is, as we look at these industry verticals, they have different hardware needs because of the services they need to run. So how do we build a ubiquitous infrastructure that allows us to run these vertical applications that have very unique needs? And then how do we orchestrate it? And I think, as we look at orchestration, from an orchestration point of view, as everybody said here, it's very distributed. So we probably will start to see hierarchical orchestration with controllers, very lightweight. I mean, this is something that is running, on the edge side and taking instructions from the hierarchical controller or the manager above him and doing orchestration locally and then providing command and control back. In terms of the number of servers, like Diego mentioned, in terms of OpenStack taking multiple servers, I think we'll have to get to headless environments where there's no control from a management point of view. The control platforms are not on the edge side, because otherwise, the business case just doesn't work. Doesn't work. So, we have to look at control systems that are sitting in the back end with only the compute platform sitting with the appropriate storage and the virtual networking. And how do we stitch all of these things together with orchestration, with programmability of the infrastructure so we can run the right application with the right workloads. And then also operationalization. How do we operationalize these things and provide the right target metrics to the ISVs? I mean, it's not just, okay, we can run the app. They want to see how it is behaving, what experience it is delivering. So what KPIs we need to build in monitoring and operating these edge nodes that will be viable for the ISVs. So it's not just the orchestration, but the whole OSS aspect becomes very, very critical.
And I would add something that is what we don't need at all, which is over-regulation from the beginning. Because the temptation of saying, well, this is another telco service, let's regulate it. Let's guarantee what the regulators call an open offering of the infrastructure and open access to the infrastructure, because that would kill innovation. I could understand that, for example, regulating, according to the vertical, regulating health or activities that are, really involving human lives is something that is serious. But regulating service to the industry, or regulating entertaining, or regulating touristic services, things like that, the temptation would be very high. Because at the end, it's something that is, you look at, well, these guys should be regulated by definition. They have been always regulated, why not? And that would kill all the innovation. And at the end, this is like Caroline was saying before, one way or the other, if you need edge services, somebody will occupy the space. And if you cannot move, someone else will move.
Okay, thank you. We're about halfway through, and I'm going to bring some changes now. There's an audience out there, I can't see them very well from up here, but I'm going to ask you for some questions from the floor now. What often happens at these events is we get to the end of the discussion, and there's booze available, and so nobody asks many questions. So you're going to ask some tonight, because you're going to ask now. So I'd like any of you who would like to, please identify yourself, say who you are, and address it to the panel, or individual member of the panel as you'd like to, and ask a question. We've got a volunteer.
Hello. Hi, Ran from ASOX. A company that do virtual RAN, virtual base station at the edge, focus on enterprise use case. We're speaking a lot about MEC for the enterprises, especially in the use cases where it's relatively the high end of the enterprises, the healthcare, the hospitality, the stadiums. These organizations typically have a very large data center that runs a lot of applications themselves with strong local IT. When you look on the Wi-Fi networks, they have full control on the network. All the data, secure, goes to the data center. Wi-Fi has its own downsides compared to cellulars, which are known like security and mobility and availability and best effort versus SLA. What is your opinion of allowing the enterprises to build their own MEC on the service provider spectrum using a network slice? So basically putting a MEC platform at the edge that allow, not necessarily the carrier to force, to bring the solution and to force the enterprise to run on the solution, rather allowing them to access the cellular network on a slice and build their own MEC at a much lower cost probably.
That's a hell of a question.
He hasn't been drinking enough. Keep drinking.
Would anybody like to attempt to answer that? So,
well, it's a bit difficult. Nobody has a crystal ball right now telling the truth in this space. People will have to pay for these services, and the question is how will the business cases finally look like? But definitely that's one of the key goals also with 5G. And but 5G won't come all with its full beauty just on the first service. We're going to start with new radio services and then move slowly into that direction. So I believe we still have a couple of years ahead of us, but definitely the focus also from the business development side has to be working with the enterprises and working on cases which are supporting these concepts and make that viable as an option for the enterprise as well, and will bring benefits to the customer and the service provider.
So, technically, I don't see a big issue in doing that. I mean, there are some regulatory issues if it comes to our frequencies and the control over it, and there are the business case questions on how to deal with the thing. But the experiments we do today with enterprises, some of them really want exactly that.
Well, what is good is that you mentioned the third ingredient that is not in the title of the panel. For 5G, you have MEC, you have NFV, and you have a spectrum. Without the spectrum, I mean, and the spectrum is something that is extremely limited and is extremely expensive. And the point is who's going to pay for the spectrum, and who's going to pay for the spectrum, because probably at the some of the spectrum we are talking for 5G, probably it could be very much localized in a stadium or a very controlled environment. But anyway, spectrum is something that there are not owners, but there are someone that is regulating the spectrum and associated licenses. And so far, licenses are associated nationwide. They are not associated in this square. You own the spectrum, in the other street, you own the other spectrum, because it's very difficult to manage. But that would depend very much on the business agreements, and that would depend very much precisely on the regulators, because the spectrum is regulated. So who knows?
Diego, the interesting thing that Aaron brought up was we actually work with HP in one of the cases in a casino. And this is a business case there, because when you, in the casino, they actually have ladies and come up and sell cigar to you. Today, they use Wi-Fi to process the credit card payment, and Wi-Fi many times fails. And in fact, we were actually there. Then they asked, would you go up there and to follow her to pay? Those guys said, no, we're not going to get up and walk across. Yeah, have you walked through the casino filled with smoke? And people said, no. So he lost sales. Very expensive, Dominican cigar. So in that case, they actually said, I would like to do this using, really simple point of sales, but runs on a Mac, runs on their licensed spectrum. So that is a business model you could strike with the very motivated.
It's technically
technical is not an issue. Exactly.
It's about the rules and the money that
motivated enterprise wants to hand over money, and motivated operator can make it work.
I think this is the same thing that we were working with the large airline operator. Remember the private LTE? The case where aircraft lands, you have private LTE to transfer the data and do the analytics of what happened during the flight. Before the flight leaves, so you have a private LTE. So that could be a case that could be made for some of these.
Yeah.
You got a very comprehensive answer to what was a fairly comprehensive question, or intro to it. Thank you for that. Let's have another one before we move back to our discussion up here. Second question, please. Or do you want me to nominate somebody?
No questions.
Don't all run forward at once.
Just one.
Hi. From a different angle, what is the missing links that you believe there are today that will enable you to accelerate the 5G or NFV deployment? Practically, what are the entrepreneur's advice that you will give? What do you miss in terms of components, technology, solutions?
accelerate it. Basically, I would say there is one thing that would accelerate adoption of 5G, NFV, or whatever technology, and it's demand. If there is people asking, I mean, I'm willing to pay real money for it, you will have 5G tomorrow, almost. Now, seriously, I think that still there are a couple of aspects that probably, when it comes mostly to, well, in the case of 5G, let me insist, is about the spectrum and how the spectrum is going to be allocated and how the, some issues about the air interface are going to be solved in a way that is viable worldwide, because it doesn't make any sense that, I mean, I remember last year I saw a map of the different spectrum allocation by country and region, and it was, when there was at least at some intersection, you have the line in yellow, and there was only one yellow line. The rest was red, no green at all. Because there is no agreement on how things are going to be allocated, and if you don't go worldwide or close, at least region-wide, it's going to be complicated economically to go for mass production. Apart from that, I think that one of the challenges for this kind of edge computing and all the like happening is precisely the real challenge right now is about security. Security needs to be improved, a much stronger security models have to be in place. We're talking about that, at least, normally we're talking about always two parties in the communication, the server, the client, the network, the user. Now we're talking at least three: the provider, the network, the edge network, and the user. And probably we're talking 4 or 5 because many of the services are going to be composed somehow. So you need a much more comprehensive, agile, and reliable trust model, and something that allows you to be sure that you fulfill all, you know, authentication, authorization, accounting, whatever, and you cannot rely on blockchains because they are extremely complicated. There's another round. So there is I see that there are the strong challenge in finding security models that are trustworthy for the complicated environment and efficient enough to address all the issues. We're talking about very low latency, short loop responses.
Indeed, that's tightly related as well to the cloud native discussion we had earlier. And the paradigm we're following on the insider jokes while we are laughing here. So the paradigm we are following here is still the access control list paradigm most of us are used to. Now, in such a cloud native world where you have microservices which are spun up and down again, and it's a very dynamic environment, and these ACL-based security models just won't work anymore. So you need to have the application intent in there, and you need probably to have identity in there as well, and that still requires quite some development work to actually achieve that.
So I think we are doing quite well as a whole industry in accelerating 5G already. So I'm probably more afraid of going too fast. Because, I mean, exactly, as long as security is not solved, there's still a lot of issues discussed around. But as a whole industry, it's a major movement being as quick as possible. As a whole industry, I think we're doing quite fine. I don't think we need even more acceleration on that.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Karen, do you want to say something? Yes, of course, go on.
I understand the use of word for 5G. I think 5G, MEC helps 5G RoI case, but MEC can happen ahead of 5G. In fact, we're doing that now. In fact, I think it must happen prior to 5G in order to solidify when 5G rolls around that we have done all the learning. The security part, I fully understand, but I'm a firm believer you got to try it. HP and us just shepherd a deal through. And I'm telling you, the first time is like giving birth. You had to go through security czar, and you had to go through CIO checking. Finally, the network guys comes and go through the network entry. You go through 3 times the hurdle, but you learn a lot, and you learn what not to do. So we got to do that now. That's my plea to everybody. Say, please roll up your sleeve. You may fail, you may look foolish, but hey, I look foolish plenty of time in my life. I don't get here without looking foolish. So we got to do that. And paradigm and blockchain.
Thank you very much.
By the way, behind the scene, if anybody say paradigm, he's buying a drink. If anybody say blockchain, I'm buying a drink. So far, 4 and 4.
Yes, I'm buying 4 very small ones. I'll see you later. Thank you very much for the question. Let's move back to the body of the discussion again. We've got one more area I'd like to cover before we wrap, which is this. What are the challenges in creating an NFV stroke MEC architecture for CSPs? We've got 3 CSPs here in front of them. You're working with this every day. What do you find the most challenging? What's the most difficult? And where are you with them?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, the challenges are in serious deployment and getting it up and running in scale type of issues. But that's sort of, this part is sort of rolling along. It's sort of a normal thing going along, having some challenges here and there, but it's possible to fix. I think where the big challenges are to create more benefits out of the cloud native paradigm, to basically get the automation going more heavily. I mean, we believe cloud native should give more benefits, cost benefits, operational expense benefits for automation. The other topics are really sort of this more multi-stakeholder type of scenarios, which we are probably used to from MPLS VPN times, but not from everywhere, not for mobile at all.
Yeah, I think we're in a different world. I think the architecture by itself, that's not too difficult, because we need to work in a different way. We need to work in an iterative way. Yeah, and in the past, I mentioned this yesterday at the Intel Network Builders event, the industry was kind of suffering from a POC virus. So the idea was always, we need to build a proof of concept. I think this is the wrong approach. We need to come up with an initial architecture, implement it, bring it into production, learn from there, and then go through the next iteration. And this is the way how you're dealing in this cloud compute software world. Mm-hmm. And not, we need to think theoretically, what are the use cases, and some of these things are just developing while you're working on this. And I think that's part of the cultural change we all need to go through to actually adopt that different way of working.
And I brought that I think that is very important here. It's not only about the supporting architecture. We need a software architecture that facilitates the creation of those applications on those multi-provider environments. And we need for that a software architecture that has to be new. We cannot rely, for example, on current cloud models, because current cloud models are oriented to a widespread, enormous data center with a great capacity, and you can migrate, you cannot care less about that. We're talking about something different. And we're talking about different challenges, and we're talking about a programming model that makes application developers to have an easy environment for this, for writing the code, for debugging the code, for testing, and for deploying. And this is something that, thinking the other day, discussing with some colleagues about MEC and all the like, something that came to my mind is that now that we are living this second or third incarnation of the AI, probably is the moment to start with the second incarnation of something that has been forgotten as well, that is the agents system. Because we're talking agents here. Pieces of codes that are from third parties and that will be mobile on infrastructure that can be hostile to them. At the same time, they can be hostile to the infrastructure and be used, sent, and required by the users. Look at it, and probably we should get some inspiration in the previous agent models to see whether we can come with a software model that is usable for the application developers.
Thank you. Vinay, what do you say, coming from Hewlett Packard Enterprise, what do you say to that?
So I think, as Alex and Diego said about the challenges, I think part of the challenges that we are seeing in the industry is stemming from the fact that most ISVs and most NEFs basically didn't build, cloud native to start with, or didn't build with virtualization in mind. So a lot of this work was taking what they had on appliances and moving it towards virtualized environment. So, as we look at the orchestration challenges, a lot of it stems from the fact that, all they've done is converted what was there before into the virtualized form. So we struggle with basic things like, okay, I've launched an instance, but I don't know how to apply a license. And it's seriously, a lot of these things are challenges that people in orchestration realm face day in, day out. So how do we get out of this mode and truly get into the cloud native where all of these things are accessible as services? In other words, I can go and retrieve a license, and do a number of the things that today we struggle with. It's not just licensing, configuration. There are 100 XML files, configuration files that need to be edited before a function becomes live. And somebody has to either manually or script these things. And if one thing fails, so a lot of these challenges, I think, as we get to the cloud native realm, will become simpler because you will have smaller functions. Configurations can be pushed out from discovery services and so forth. So I think as we go through the journey, the cloud native technology will definitely help us. And in the short term, there are solutions that both HP and Intel have been bringing to the marketplace, whether it's orchestration or doing the matchmaking for hardware and VNFs. So a lot of this technology is there. It's just organizationally also bringing in the carriers, ops people up to speed on making sure they understand how to operate these things, because they've historically operated, the classical network appliances. So I think it's a journey that everybody is taking. I think different parts of organizations are in different places. I think the office of the CTOs and the product management teams are farther ahead than the ops team, in my opinion. And I think that's what we are seeing.
Caroline, you have anything to add to that?
Let's just do it. If you want to say you're being cloud native, you better be moving at the speed of the cloud guys. They go do it, just so do it. In fact, I'll pull a plug in. So Axel and I are both on the tip board. We're setting up MEC. We're setting up AI machine learning group. It really is to invite people to come in across the spectrum, from Facebook, from people like Intel, from people like you guys, an audience. Come in and experiment and try it out. It doesn't really, I'm just like sick of all the talking and just let's go ahead and do it. That's what TIP is for, right? We set up the lab for that, yeah. So, by the way, he's the chairman of the board, so I work for him.
Well, we're out of time, and I think people will agree that was a super panel. I'd just like to say thank you very much indeed, all of you, for a contribution, particularly to Diego, who said before we came on stage, I won't be saying much, my throat hurts.
He said what?
It's better now, isn't it?
Yeah, so good conversation, good people around.
Yes, exactly. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here as well. And please show your appreciation for a great panel.